Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Hutchinson Community College Stringer Fine Arts Center for the first debate of the Republican candidates for the Kansas 1st Congressional District House of Representatives. I am Jason Ball, President of the Hutchinson and Reno County Chamber of Commerce. I will be acting as your MC and moderator for this evening. This Republican primary race for 1st Congressional District of Kansas will be decided at the polls on Tuesday, August 2nd, and the winner will run in the general election on Tuesday, November 8th. The time to cast a ballot is fast approaching for a primary election. Voter registration is open until July 12, and advance in-person mail-in balloting can begin on July 13. So people will be making their decisions soon. Before we begin, I need to give some well-deserved recognition to those who made tonight's event possible. I want to begin by thanking the Hutchinson News for co-sponsoring tonight's event. They have raised awareness about this event through their print and online channels. They have also provided an important conduit for voters in our region to submit questions online, and there'll be a little bit more about that later. And tonight we are being live streamed on Facebook and Twitter as we speak. So don't do anything embarrassing or it will live on the internet forever, right? I also want to thank Hutchinson Community College for giving us the access to this wonderful facility tonight. I can't think of a better example of what an asset the community college is to our town and our community than by allowing us to use this facility for events like this. So thank you to Hutchinson Community College. Can we give both those organizations an applause? We have some security here tonight that I also want to recognize. We are joined here tonight by officers Terry Martin and Michael Collins from the Hutchinson Police Department. They're here to keep us and our participants safe. You can never thank an officer too much. Can we give them a big round of applause? Finally, I want to recognize the Hutchinson and Reno County Chamber of Commerce Public Policy Advisory Committee. The Chamber does not endorse candidates. That is not what we're here to do tonight. However, it is part of our mission to organize opportunities for our business members and the community to learn about public policy issues and to interact with our elected officials and representatives. So that's why we're here tonight, and that's what put tonight's event together. Questions this evening will be asked by a panel of 3 experts in public policy and news. They have prepared a battery of questions for the evening's debate. So first, we are joined by Ron Sylvester, Managing Editor for the Hutchinson News. Ron, give a wave, please. Ron has had an amazing career in over 30-plus years as a journalist. He's had lunch with Johnny Cash and looked into the eyes of the BTK serial killer. He's covered the World Series, interviewed astronauts, worked a beat covering the famous Las Vegas Strip, and covered stories about Disneyland. Ron returned to Kansas recently as Managing Editor for the Hutchinson News, where he oversees daily production of the website and newspaper. Ron has authored a book and taught social media and multimedia journalism across the country, and is a former national board member of the Society of Professional Journalists. Thank you, Ron. He's joined tonight by Professor Kathleen Rackaway of the Political Science Department at Fort Hays State University. Prior to joining Fort Hays State University in 2003, Professor Rackaway taught political science at Columbia College, Lincoln University, State Fair Community College, the University of Missouri, and Lynn State Technical College, where he also served as chair of the Political Science Department. Professor Rackaway serves the Faculty Senate at Fort Hays State University, the American Democracy Project, and is faculty advisor to the College Republicans. Professor Rackaway is part of the Insight to Kansas consortium of political scientists who write weekly columns on state politics for Kansas newspapers. He is the author of American Government, Political Culture in an Online World. Professor Rackaway was named Fort Hays State University's President's Distinguished Scholar in 2015. Thank you, Professor Rackaway. Our third panelist is Fred Goff, news director at Eagle Communications from our own local radio station on 1450 KWBW. Fred is a native resident of Hutchinson and has pretty much lived here all his life. He got his start in radio in 1973 while he was a junior Hutchinson High School. Fred has been on the radio consistently since 1978, where he began on the music side. So during that career, he's played about every format you can think of, including rock and country. Around the year 2000, he started working in the news department at Eagle Communications and later transitioned to covering the news for all of its stations. He loves learning about the things happening in the state and the community before others have had a chance to hear about it, and most importantly, loves meeting the people through that process of gathering the news. Thank you so much, Fred. A couple questions about online and audience questions that I'd like to clear up tonight. Questions have been submitted through the Hutchinson News online, and we will be incorporating some of those into the program tonight. I have been asked by a number of people prior to the beginning of the proceedings here if we are going to be doing cards. Anyone who has attended one of our policy forums from the Hutchinson Chamber knows that we're famous for passing out cards and pencils and letting people write their questions. For a few reasons tonight, we are going to forego that part of the typical program. One is this space is plenty full, as you can all see. The stairs would pose just a little bit of a safety risk and potentially distraction. But more importantly, online, we had a significant amount of questions submitted. It was a tidal wave of questions that we got to work through for our panelists to ask tonight. And so because of that, we have plenty of diversity in topics to address, and so we are not going to be taking questions at the facility tonight. So that's how that decision ended up getting made. And finally, before we're joined by the candidates, I know tonight is exciting for many of you. It certainly is for me. My staff will tell you I've been bouncing off the walls all day long. Nationally this year, we've seen how sometimes that excitement can unfortunately turn into rudeness or worse. And I would say that civil discourse has suffered as a result. So please be respectful of all the audience members here tonight and to those watching over live stream and to all of our participants on stage. Please refrain from booing or interruptions during the Q&A. Don't obstruct the view of those seated behind you with signs, flags, etc. If you like a response tonight, and I have been asked this question, applause are just great. However, the longer that takes, the fewer questions we can work in. So please keep it somewhere less than what happens with the State of the Union address. The winner of this election is going to have to put up with at least 2 of those, and goodness knows they're hard enough to watch on television. So let's demonstrate how Kansans have a good, meaningful, policy-focused debate, and thank you in advance for your cooperation. All right. Enough for me. Someone's applauding because I'm now done with my vote. That's appropriate. Let's bring out the candidates. Dr. Roger Marshall is an OB-GYN from Great Bend, Kansas. He earned his undergraduate degree in biochemistry at Kansas State University before graduating from the University of Kansas School of Medicine, earning his MD in 1987. He served 7 years in the Army Reserves, where he trained in Mobile Support Unit, rising to the rank of captain. He served as chairman of the board of Great Bend Regional Hospital for 14 years and is an immediate past district governor of his Rotary International. As a physician, he has delivered a mind-boggling 5,000 babies. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to Dr. Roger. Congressman Tim Huelskamp is originally from Fowler, Kansas, and a resident of our own Hutchinson, Kansas. He earned his bachelor's degree at the College of Santa Fe in New Mexico and a PhD in political science from the American University in Washington, D.C. He was elected to his first term as United States Representative in November 2010 and was subsequently re-elected in 2012 and 2014. He is a member of the Congressional Steering Committee, which nominates Republican members to fill all committee assignments and chairs. This year, he was named chairman of the Small Business Committee's Economic Growth, Tax, and Capital Access Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Congressman Tim Huelskamp. The format of tonight's debate is designed to hopefully generate some informative policy dialogue. We will begin with a 3-minute opening statement from each candidate, and at the end of the program, we will conclude with a 3-minute closing statement from each candidate in the opposite order. Between opening and closing statements, we will ask as many questions as time allows, although we will not end later than 7:30, I promise you. A question will be asked. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond, so candidate A, candidate B, and then each candidate will have the opportunity for a rebuttal response of 1 minute, candidate A, candidate B, and then on to the next question in reverse order, BA, BA. There is no way to deliver these instructions without making it sound like assembly from IKEA. I estimate that we'll have about time for maybe 8 to 10 questions tonight. Leanne Cox, Vice President with the Chamber and CDB, will be timing our responses. For those of you who can't see, she's right down in front. Leanne will raise this yellow card when the candidate has 30 seconds remaining in his response. And the time will be up when you hear this sound. Very good. And I reserve the right to jump in if answers are wrong, gentlemen. All right, let's get started. The order of responses has been determined by a coin toss backstage a moment ago. Dr. Marshall won the coin toss and has elected to take the first opening statement, and we will alternate responses thereafter. Dr. Marshall.
Thank you, Jason. Good evening, Hutchinson. Good evening. How are y'all? I'm honored that you all have come here tonight. I know that you care about your country, and that's why you're here. As Jason said, I'm a physician. I'm not a politician. Matter of fact, I'm an obstetrician, and I've been on call every day or every other day for 25 years. And in that time, I have delivered over 5,000 babies. In that time, what I've learned, the most important clinical experience that I have as a physician is my ability to listen. I've learned that if I listen to my patients long enough, what's important for a congressman to be able to do is to listen to the constituents. And that's indeed what we've been doing the past year and a half. Before I tell you where I'm going, I want to tell you where I've been. I was born in El Dorado, Kansas. Would have been the 5th generation farm kid. My parents figured out pretty quickly you couldn't make a living anymore on 160 acres. So they moved to El Dorado. My dad became the chief of police there for 25 years. But we stayed very, very active in the agricultural of El Dorado. We had 2 family farms. We spent our weekends growing up on those farms. By the time I was 14, I spent the summers working on the family farms. By the time I was 16, I was sorting cattle at a sale barn, and turned 18, decided to go to the local community college. How many folks here went to community college or a tech school? I think community colleges are real important. My wife also a graduate of Butler County Community College. It's hard to believe, about 30 years ago, I was out here competing on this track field behind us, and I saw a guy named Joe Edwards, high jump 7 foot, and I knew right away I was no longer in a Kansas high school state track meet. Went on to K-State, worked multiple jobs. Probably my most famous job ever was I was a bartender at Kites. I learned my social graces there, went on to KU Med Center, and joined the Army Reserve for 7 years. My wife and I moved back to Great Bend, America 25 years ago. We've been married 33 years, have 4 wonderful children. The pup will be a senior this year at Great Bend High School, and we're promising another good football team. Over the past 15 months, my wife and I, my family and I have traveled some 30,000 miles. We've been in 90-some communities. We've been to 49 county farm bureau meetings. We've been to 15 big feedlots, dairies, multiple farm operations. I think I have my finger on the pulse of agriculture, which still makes 50% of our economy. As I express my policies of where I'm going, you're going to hear what people have been telling me the past 15 months. I look forward to tonight. I look forward to sharing. I've been listening and listening, and now I'm ready to lead. Thank you so much, Hutchinson, for having us over.
Thank you for being with us here tonight. I will tell you, as a 5th-generation farmer who grew up in a little town of Fowler, Kansas, town of about 500, I always get asked, you always say it's 500, because it always is. 5th-generation farmer, it is just an amazing opportunity to serve you in Washington. I think it's a testament to the openness of our system that a little kid, farm kid, out from Nowheresville, Kansas, which is the way I like it, actually ended up in Washington. and actually stand on the floor of the House last week and defend the Second Amendment, stand on the floor of the House and take on the President of the United States. I think we've done a lot of things in the last 5 years that I think are the right things to do. But I will say, if we want to do more things in Washington, we need a different occupant in that White House. My conservative record is very clear on life, on marriage, on family, on immigration, on spending. Every conservative group in this country says Tim Huelskamp has a proven conservative record. But what I will tell you, as you often fear, there are plenty of folks in Washington that say they're conservative at home, but don't vote that way in Washington. With me, you see what you get. You get what you see. I actually follow through on my conservative principles. And I'll tell you, sometimes folks in Washington get upset about it. Sometimes they go out and recruit candidates. Sometimes they spend money against you. But if you look at my record, let me give you an example. Just last week, on the floor of the House, I passed whistleblower language to protect our veterans in the VA. I helped author the VA choice bill. It gives our veterans a choice. And as of today, more than 1,400 times, veterans have had choices outside of the VA. And they've taken those choices here in Kansas. That's making a difference. I've also worked hard to defend our military chaplains, protect their religious liberties, which is a very big issue right now. If you see what's happening coming out of this administration. And with the decision today, there is no doubt the Supreme Court does not like the unborn, and you will have with me, I will continue to stand for life. I will continue to stand up for those principles because I've conducted 372 town halls, more than any member of Congress. Because you've got to be willing to listen. And that's what we've done. I take your concerns and your questions, I take them back to the VA committee, back to the Small Business Committee. I'm now the chairman of the Small Business Committee. Because we're there to make a difference. Because this district is about small businesses. This district is about families. This district is about fighting for those principles that built this country, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and those conservative values we all hold dear. I look forward to your questions. Thank you, Jason, for having us here tonight, and thank you for the opportunity to be your member of Congress and to be with you tonight.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Now our first question from Ron Sylvester. Congressman Huelskamp will respond first.
Thank you both for being here this evening. During the last week, a lot of Republicans have called Democrats obstructionists. But, you know, Ted Cruz is a Republican and who staged a filibuster in the Senate. What examples can either of you cite when you praised a Democrat or a Republican who did not share your views, and what would you do to improve the spirit of civility in public discourse in this country?
That's a great question, Ron. But as I mentioned earlier, if we want to promote civility in Washington, D.C., I think we need a new president of the White House. He has done nothing to promote civility. And this last week on the floor of the House, you saw what happens when Democrats were sitting on the floor of the House obstructing. They try to prevent me from actually getting up to vote. That doesn't help the process. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a vote on these things. But I want to tell you where I really think we made progress of working together, and that's dealing with the VA. I've served on the VA committee for 5 years, and we've made changes to provide more choices for our veterans, and that's working for our Kansas hospitals, for our veterans and their families. And we did that on a bipartisan basis, and we continue to reform the VA, working together with both sides of the aisle. That's the way we can make progress. We identify the problem, which is in Obama's VA, and we fix it by providing more choices for our veterans. It's working well. We've got a long ways to go, because after decades and decades of mismanagement, the VA needs continued reform.
Thank you so much. I'm a community guy. I've been the leader of most every volunteer organization in Great Bend, sat on many church boards, United Way boards, all different boards. And when we lead organizations or businesses, you never sit there and say, are you a Democrat or a Republican? I don't think national security is a Democrat or a Republican issue. I don't think that the economy is a Democrat or Republican issue. My whole life is about building consensus and bringing people together to solve problems.
I will say there are a number of things that I've helped pass. I mentioned the VA choice bill. I mentioned military religious freedom. I helped sign on to pass dozens and dozens of restrictions on the administration to protect our First Amendment rights, to protect life, protect abortion, or protect the unborn from abortion. We've done that. And that takes together working with the other side. But I will tell you, when the other side is wrong and they disagree with you, I'm going to stand with you. Because there are some principles you have to stand on. And I see over and over in Washington, D.C., far too often, there are not many folks with principles.
Again, whether I'm running a business or running United Way, working with other members of my community, I'm focusing on working together to solve problems, bringing people together at every chance we can. But I never have had to compromise any principles either. So, thank you.
Thank you. Second question from Professor Rackaway. Dr. Marshall will respond first.
Gentlemen, agricultural prices, among other things, have been blamed by Governor Brownback for budgetary problems in the state of late. As ag prices are strongly determined by federal policy, not only state coffers are affected. Family farms are struggling all over western Kansas. What can you and the federal government do to make sure that ag prices simultaneously do not gouge the working family, but still make sure family farmers in Kansas can earn a decent living?
Thank you, Professor Rockaway. I think the number one thing I can do at the federal level is help grow this economy and help grow jobs. And that's something I've done my whole life. I understand business. I understand how to grow jobs. The biggest problem with our economy is government overregulation. Government overregulation creates uncertainty. Whether it's in farming, banking, or healthcare, government is causing too much regulation. My job in Congress is to promote the economy, to promote trade across the countries, to promote opening up markets in Cuba. I'll be the congressman who goes to China and helps sell Milo to China. I'll be the congressman who makes China enforce and obey the same rules and treaties that we've signed up with. So I think what I can do is help grow the economy and help be a proponent of trade of our commodities and goods here in Kansas.
It's my personal belief that jobs aren't created by government. They're not created by bureaucrats and politicians in Washington. They're created by people like you. Entrepreneurs that set out with a great idea, and we try to keep government out of the way. But I will say with this administration, whether it's the EPA, whether it's OSHA, take your pick of federal agency, IRS, take your pick. These are the agencies that are standing in the way of getting our economy growing again. And so what I've done in the House is being part of the effort to stop those agencies, to slow down the regulations and require them to actually follow the law. This president has attempted to rewrite the law again and again. On the issues of trade, I've sat down with the ambassador from Vietnam, the ambassador from Japan, the ambassador from Taiwan, and said, we want to sell you stuff from Kansas. And I tell you, for a fifth-generation farm kid, the opportunity to sit there and visit with the Cuban ambassador a month ago and say, we're here to do business, it's pretty exciting. There are tremendous opportunities. 95% of the customers for our Kansas products are outside this country. And we're going to meet those needs by opening up those markets.
I've helped create hundreds of jobs. I understand small business. I understand how to grow those jobs. But at the federal level, what Kansas needs is a voice on the House Ag Committee. And we've been without that voice now for 3 years. What I can do, which Tim cannot do unfortunately, is get back on that House Ag Committee and give us a voice at the table on developing all ag policy.
Appreciate that, Roger. I'm actually on the steering committee that makes those decisions, ladies and gentlemen. But the one reason I'm going to be back on there is John Boehner's no longer speaker. It was John Boehner that said, Congressman Huelskamp, if you don't vote the way I tell you to vote, you're going to be kicked off the Ag Committee. And actually, his assistant said this, it's unbelievable. His assistant actually said, you can get back on, this was 2 years ago, if you vote the way we tell you to vote. Ladies and gentlemen, is that what's wrong with Washington? We're insiders, career politicians are telling us what to do. We need to change that system. We need to continue to stand up for them and say, hey, it's one thing to say you're conservative, and every Republican does that. It's another one to go there and vote that way. And in terms of the House Ag Committee, we'll be back on there. We'll continue to fight. We'll continue to work for our farmers and our ranchers and indeed all of our small businesses. That's why I'm already a chairman of the Small Business Subcommittee. That's why I had a hearing on these issues just a few weeks ago.
Our third question from Fred Goff. Congressman Huelskamp will respond first.
Okay, it's well known that both presidential candidates have strong negatives with the voters, but voters don't have a very good opinion of Congress either. Well, according to a recent Gallup poll, only 16% approve of the way Congress is doing their jobs, while 80% disapprove. Those numbers coming from earlier this month. As our congressman, I want to know if you would do anything to change that perception, to bring trust back to government.
That's a great question, and I think that the question, belies a misunderstanding of our federal government. At the founding of this government, Americans distrusted their leaders. That's why they put a constitution in place that said, these are the rules of the game. These are the rules of the game, and whether you're the president, a member of Congress, or a justice on the Supreme Court, you're required to follow the law like anyone else. But I think what folks get upset about the president, about the courts, about members of Congress who think they are above the law. And this president has tried to rewrite the law again and again. And this week, the courts just struck it down again and says your amnesty was unconstitutional, Mr. President. If we want to build trust, I think the thing you do is follow through on your promises. I pledged to you 5 years ago that I would be a conservative, that I would vote my conscience, vote my conservative principles, and vote the way you wanted me to. And that's why I've conducted 372 town halls. I think there are a lot of my colleagues, they never leave Washington. That's their career. They own homes there. They own homes in other states, but they don't actually live back where we live, right here at home.
Perhaps the biggest problem in Washington, D.C. is a lack of leadership. Professional politicians never have the opportunity to develop their leadership skills. They never have a chance to work with volunteers or at a school board where you have to grow consensus and solve problems together. I think if we didn't have professional politicians there would be much more credibility, and people weren't taking votes to just whatever the next election cycle is going to bring them. So I think we need term limits. I think we'll bring credibility from all the different professions of our hometowns.
I'd like to go back to an earlier issue we talked about getting things done. The VA is a perfect example when both sides can actually see the problem. But I will tell you, when I showed up on day one in the Veterans Committee, there was a huge divide. There were folks on the Democrat side of the aisle said, we don't need any reform at the VA. There were Republicans that actually said the same thing. But when we saw these huge scandals, ladies and gentlemen, I stepped up to the plate. You can look at the videos, you look at the tape, and look at where I called out the VA. I said, you need to take care of our veterans. And in the last 5 years, our office has helped over 1,000 veterans get the care and benefits they deserve. We've got a lady here that worked most of those cases. But you know, at the end of the day, you shouldn't have to call your member of Congress or call a senator to get the benefits you deserve. We owe it to those veterans. We're going to fix that, and that's why I need 2 more years. We're going to continue to work on this problem. We need to fix the VA, and it needs to start at the top down. I know we can make a difference. That's how you come together. That's how you build trust, by actually keeping the promises we made to our veterans.
Leadership and consensus. That's what I will bring to the table, is a real-world leadership and consensus, a consensus builder, whatever the problem is. I can reach down the aisle, I can reach across the aisle.
Next question is an online submission received through the Hutchinson News. Ron Sylvester will deliver it, and Dr. Marshall will respond first.
We had a lot of questions about healthcare, and some of them were pretty specific. Here's one of them. Critical access hospitals are a vital part of the economy of many small towns in the healthcare system in Kansas. What will you do to help support and make profitable all currently existing critical access hospitals, including those in close proximity to currently existing private hospitals in Kansas?
Well, certainly if anybody understands critical access hospitals, I think I would qualify. Worked with them for 20, 25 years. Probably the number one reason I would want to repeal the Affordable Care Act that no one's talking about is that it's a robbing Peter to pay Paul situation. The Affordable Care Act took money from Medicare reimbursement for hospitals to help expand Medicaid expansion. So we're taking money from Medicare for hospitals to pay for Medicaid patients. And that's killing critical access hospitals. It's killing Kansas right now. Beyond that, we have to grow those economies around those critical access hospitals so there's people that's going to use them. But I would focus on repealing the Affordable Care Act and other simplified solutions, incremental approach to us, to fixing and replacing the Affordable Care Act.
Let me be very specific. If you want to save our rural hospitals, if you want to save our critical access hospitals, if you want to save Medicare, without a doubt, we need to repeal Obamacare. My record on this is not talk. I have voted 60 times to repeal Obamacare. Here's the problem. John Boehner, as Speaker, spent 5 years not letting us ever vote on a replacement, ladies and gentlemen. I helped introduce sign on to the American Health Care Reform Act that would increase choice, increase options, and protect Medicare, and help our seniors and help our hospitals. John Boehner wouldn't let us vote on that because special interests help write Obamacare. But I will tell you, I have 70 community hospitals across the 1st District, and the one I was born in no longer exists. I have met with the hospitals. I have met with their leaders. I've met with the communities. I said, we need to preserve these hospitals. Obamacare is killing our rural hospitals. We know that without a doubt. We start with a repeal, and then we replace it with something that actually protects our choices in our rural hospitals.
The next thing I would go after is looking at who's doing a good job. I was at Lakeland Hospital just a couple weeks ago, and they're doing a tremendous job there. There are some rural hospitals that are surviving. There are some communities that are doing better than others. So I would amplify and accentuate the people who are doing things the best. But somehow the base of this is you have to keep that economy strong. Without a strong economy, there's nothing that we can do. So we have to grow the economies. We have to repeal the Affordable Care Act, but we need to know what to replace it with. Part of the problem is we can't attack this incrementally because there's such a great divide in Washington. The left and right are yelling at each other so loud, we can't even discuss these incremental steps that would help the situation.
We have passed, I've helped pass a number of small changes to Obamacare. The most overtly negative parts of that, and the President was forced to sign those. But at the end of the day, my opponent has not made very clear throughout the campaign, we have it on videotape, he said if you would expand Obamacare in this state, he would make $400,000 off that expansion because he owns a hospital, a physician-owned hospital. At the end of the day, I have no conflict of interest. My only interest is serving Kansas and make certain whether you're in Hutchinson, whether you're in Fowler, Northwest Kansas, North Central Kansas, that you actually have a choice in health care. Obamacare is about taking away our choices and putting that in the hands of bureaucrats and politicians in D.C. But what we did with the VA would put it in the hands of our veterans. We need to do the same throughout our healthcare system.
Fifth question from Ron Sylvester. Congressman Huelskamp will respond first.
You both say you're in favor of repealing the Affordable Care Act. What plan do you have for actually doing that, and where can voters find details of the plan you want as the replacement?
That's a great question. It's a question I attempted to ask John Boehner numerous times and brought that up at a Republican conference. So what are Republicans for? We know we're against Obamacare, and we voted 60 times to repeal Obamacare, but not once did John Boehner let us have a vote on an attorney. 2 years ago, I helped put together and sign something called the American Health Care Reform Act. I think it would have answered some of these problems by providing more competition and choice, taking on the trial lawyers, taking away the incentive to do tests rather than take care of our patients. But John Boehner wouldn't let that come up to a vote. But just Friday, the current Speaker of the House did allow the introduction of a plan to replace Obamacare. Will they let us vote on that in the next 2 weeks? Probably not. But at the end of the day, that's what's so wrong with Washington. They won't let us vote on alternatives. They won't let us have a battle on the floor and actually talk about what we're for. We can do so much better, ladies and gentlemen, than Obamacare. American Health Care Reform Act, you can look that up. That has a lot of the principles that I support and would make a huge difference.
I need to start by correcting something that Tim said. Medicaid expansion would have helped most every rural hospital in this state, including our hospital, but despite that, I've spoken against Medicaid expansion because the net impact of the Affordable Care Act is negative on rural hospitals. The net impact of the Affordable Care Act on rural hospitals is negative. So I've come out against Medicaid expansion, even though that would have helped us in the short run. Now to answer your question, Speaker Ryan has something out called A Better Way. I think there's some really good points in that. I've sat down with a couple of the positions in Congress and helped develop a plan. I think an incremental approach will work great. Some very simple steps. Simple steps like letting health care be bid across state lines. We need tort reform. We need to let people be able to deduct their premiums from their income taxes, regardless of whether it's through the office or through a home. We need to work on pharmacy costs. I got some ideas about that as well. And we need to be able to take care of the people that truly need the help the most.
The question is, it's not the ideas. The question is, let's have a vote and start working on them. But without a doubt, until we have a new president in the White House, there is unlikely to ever be a repeal of Obamacare. We need to replace Barack Obama with someone that actually respects your choices, respects your rights, and says you should make the decision about your health care. Yes, I've been actually working with doctors in Congress. Actually, I've introduced bills that would make this change. But at the end of the day, I do not have a conflict of interest on this issue. And without a doubt, we need to repeal Obamacare. We need to replace it with something that actually protects and respects our liberties and our choices in health care.
The third biggest concern that we have in this country is health care. 1/6 of your budget is being spent on health care. If there's no other reason to send me to Washington, D.C., this would be the issue to send me to go fix. I understand health care as a physician. I ran a private practice for 25 years. I've helped run a hospital for 15 years. I buy health insurance for 300 employees. I buy health insurance for a group of 5, and I've helped oversee 3 county health departments. I understand health care. I can anticipate the unintended consequences that most laws make. I will do a great job helping fixing health care.
Next question from Chapman Rackaway and Dr. Marshall.
Let's return to agriculture for a moment. Congressman Huelskamp's doctoral dissertation recently became news when it was revealed he made the claim that agriculture subsidies like CRP, and I'm going to quote, ignored the productivity advances in the industry, comma, not to mention any semblance of economic reality, period, end quote. Despite the fact that his family has received more than $1 million in federal ag subsidies over the years, Dr. Marshall has used that as an attack piece, claiming Huelskamp is insensitive to the needs of struggling family farms in Kansas. Should we abandon agriculture subsidies then? And if not, how can we justify the $20 billion in subsidized direct payments and crop insurance annually distributed by a federal government both candidates have described as bloated and overspending?
Thanks so much. To me, the holy grail of the Farm Bill is crop insurance. And what I think I can do is I think I can go to Washington, D.C. and sit down with a person who's never been on a farm before and explain to them that crop insurance doesn't protect just the farmer, that crop insurance protects the loan at the bank, it protects downtown Hutchinson, Kansas, it protects our state and our national security. So I think the holy grail that I'm going to be always fighting for is crop insurance.
Good news for Dr. Marshall. I've already been doing that, Doctor. And one thing I want to know, Chap, is that what you quoted from my dissertation, it's not in there. I know it was reported in the Hutch News and elsewhere. It's not in there. Quote was taken out of context. The dissertation is a lot of pages, and I always say, could you find something really that was in there rather than making up a quote? I never said that. That was 25 years ago, and I didn't say that. One thing I want to point out as well is Dr. Marshall's son has actually received more direct payments from the federal government than I have. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to reform farm policy. Yes, we start with crop insurance. You look at my record, I protected crop insurance. John Boehner and Barack Obama tried to cut it last fall. Who was there and said no? That was me. Who was there on the Farm Bill trying to say, you know what, it's time that the Farm Bill was about farming. Ladies and gentlemen, the Farm Bill is 80% food stamps. 80% food stamps. Back when I started farming, it was 20% food stamps. Now it's 80%. It's time to get back to make sure the Farm Bill is about farmers.
No matter what the issue is in agriculture, we no longer have a seat at the table to even discuss it. Despite what Tim's talking about, I never read anything in the papers that he's influencing agriculture policy. If he was going to be able to get back on the House Ag Committee, why hasn't it happened yet? Why is the chairman of that committee remaining silent and saying there's no discussions going on? We just want a voice at the table so we can influence those policies.
Again, I won't be back on the Ag Committee. I'm actually on the committee that makes those decisions. Roger Marshall is not. The newspapers are not. What it comes down to, remember what I told you. John Boehner said, if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to punish you. And he tried to punish conservatives. He tried to punish so many conservatives. Ladies and gentlemen, he's no longer Speaker today. He is no longer Speaker. We need members in Washington who are not there for a career, but are there to make a difference. We have $20 trillion in debt, ladies and gentlemen. $20 trillion in debt. Now's the chance to save this country. And we can do a better farm bill. That's why Senator Pat Roberts has endorsed me, and why 5 out of 6 members of the U.S. House and Senate actually voted against the current farm bill. Because as Pat Roberts said, it's a rear view mirror looking into the past. We need to look to the future. We need to look at what we can do to continue to open up markets in Cuba, open up markets in Japan, Vietnam, Colombia, Panama, and elsewhere across this globe.
Congressman Huelskamp to respond first.
Gentlemen, both Republicans and Democrats agree or disagree on tax policy. Democrats want to close loopholes for those at the top and into the pay scale and cut taxes for those in the middle or working families. Republicans believe taxes are too high for everyone. Americans are always concerned about budgets and taxes, and we have to put up with paying taxes every spring. What would you favor for a tax policy? Would you favor something like a flat tax, eliminating the IRS and getting a national sales tax? Give me an example of what you would favor.
Yes, yes, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, I think we can get rid of the IRS. I think we can. I would take some type of flat tax, I would take some type of fair tax, but what we will not stand for is the IRS targeted people who disagree with the President of the United States. Without a doubt, Lois Lerner was doing that. I think the current IRS commissioner should be impeached and removed from office, and I think we need to start over. We need a tax code that's not 75,000 pages. It's a politician's dream. It's a special interest dream. What we need is a flat, fair, simple tax code. And there was a proposal introduced in the last week that I think would get there. But I think we need lower taxes, not higher taxes. Be very clear about it. Washington has too much of our revenue. They don't need any more from their pockets.
The government tends to make the very simple complicated, but it's the job of leaders to make the complicated simple. I'm going to favor something much simpler. I think there's very simple things we can do, low-hanging fruit that we can go after. Simple things like lowering the corporate tax from 35% to 20%, shrinking the different tax brackets down to 3. I think there's multiple opportunities that will help this economy go on, but simpler, simpler, and simpler. Again, I'm going to refer to Speaker Ryan's new bill that he's proposing, and again, I want to emphasize that Speaker Ryan happens to determine a great deal who's going to get back on those ag committees, and unfortunately, Mr. Huelskamp was also kicked off the House Budget Committee by then the chairman of that committee, Paul Ryan.
Good news again, we're already working on the plans that Dr. Marsh is talking about, working with the Speaker of the House. The Speaker wants me back on the Ag Committee, Roger, so quit saying that. Have you visited with the Speaker about this? Of course you haven't. Have you visited with the Chairman of the House Ag Committee? Of course you haven't. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm on the steering committee. But what I've done is told the folks in Washington that you're not going to kick me around, you're not going to kick my constituents around. When they kicked you off the Ag Committee, and it's about you, they wanted to punish conservatives across this country and say, hey, you've got no role in John Boehner's house. We do. John Boehner's gone. And if we want to fix this economy, we need to eliminate, at least roll back the IRS. And we need a president in the White House that's not misusing the IRS to attack its political opponents. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no excuse for that, whether it's Republican or Democrat. And once we take away that tremendous power from the IRS and get rid of those 75,000 pages of tax code, our small businesses can start flourishing here in Kansas once again.
Tim keeps bringing up the steering committee. There's 30 votes on the steering committee. Tim has one of those. I think the chances of him getting back on the Ag Committee are next to none. It's not a gamble that Kansas can make. Back to the tax structure issue, I'm very much into simplifying it. I think we need to put a freeze on the IRS. I think that we need some type of a sales tax on internet sales as well. One more piece of meat I'd like to throw back at you.
The next question again comes to us from an online submission through the Hutch News. Ron Sylvester will read the question. Dr. Marshall to respond.
Yes, and we did have a few questions come online, but then some of them probably would have rivaled the State of the Union in length. This is not one of them. This question is simply, please explain your position on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP.
I'm very much in favor of the TPP. I think you'll find most agriculture programs in Kansas are in favor of it. But the sad part of this is while we've been working day and night for 2 years on this, other countries are out negotiating unilateral agreements. Canada has approved over 90-some in this past year, while the United States has done something like 14. So it's great. Let's keep working on these. I think the Export-Import Bank is very important. I think Tim is against the Export-Import Bank based on some of his previous comments. So I'm very much in favor of trade policy and opening up markets.
The TPP is approximately 2,500 pages long, ladies and gentlemen. There are 275 pages dedicated to agriculture, and I sat down with the U.S. Trade Representative before they finished writing that thing. And I said, I'm a Kansas farmer. I'm a Kansas rancher, 5th generation. Not something I just talk about. I want to make certain you're going to protect our farmers and ranchers and make sure we have fair and equal competition. Those 275 pages do that for agriculture. But here's the problem. There's a lot of other special interests that don't like the other 2,000 pages. We have a long ways to go. We've yet to start the hearings of the Ways and Means Committee. But at the end of the day, 95% of the customers of our family farms, they live outside of the United States. 95% of the potential. That's why I've sat down with the ambassador from Vietnam, the ambassador from Cuba, sat down with the ambassador from Vietnam, actually came to Washington County to visit, sat down with the ambassador from Japan, helped put free trade agreements with Panama and Colombia through Congress, because I believe Kansas farmers can compete around the world.
The other half of this trade agreement, though, is enforcing it and following through with it. And once again, I think that's why we need a president that's going to enforce our trade agreements. I think there's a very clear choice there. Anybody but Hillary would work for me at this point. So I think very, very much we need to not only pass this type of trade, but we need to be willing to enforce the laws as well.
One of my most vivid memories as a kid had to do with something called the Russian grain embargo. You remember that? Where President Jimmy Carter, failed policy, said, we're not going to not only let our athletes compete in the 1980 Olympics, we will not sell them any wheat. And that president made that decision, our price went down at the elevator. Ladies and gentlemen, what happens on trade matters. I'm pretty excited because Kansas farmers are perhaps the most productive in the entire world. We can beat farmers and ranchers in the world. Give us a level playing field, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to continue to sell stuff. And that's what I told the ambassador from Vietnam. And the Cuban ambassador, it's kind of tough to get through there, but they are really starving. And we're 90 miles away. And I want to sell them some Kansas wheat. And we're going to continue to push that door open and say, hey, we need equal access to Japan, for example. We need equal access to these markets. And we do that by promoting, and fifth generation farmer, remember what happened in 1980. It's a great opportunity to continue to talk about the great things we do in Kansas agriculture.
Our next question from Ron Sylvester, Congressman Huelskamp, to respond first.
Mr. Huelskamp, if he wins a new term this year, will have 8 years in the House by the time the next election cycle rolls around. The Big First has had some folks in history who have held the seat for a while. Dr. Marshall calls Mr. Huelskamp a quote-unquote career politician. For both candidates, how would you describe your stand on term limits for members of Congress?
That's a great question. I support term limits for members of Congress, members of the judiciary, as well as members, bureaucrats that are head of agencies. And ladies and gentlemen, there's far too many people that serve far too long in Washington. I come home every single weekend. I've conducted 372 town halls, more than any other member of Congress, because too many people in Washington, they're not listening. And what the American people are saying is, Congressman, we think we've lost our country. We think we've lost our way. We think we have a president out of control. And Congress just said, what can they do about it? This was John Boehner. He was weak. Every time Barack Obama said to do something, he would come to us and say, hey, we can't win this one. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to win this for America. We have to fight for a way of life because, ladies and gentlemen, people in Washington, D.C. either don't care or don't know what we need out here in central, western rural Kansas. We're going to continue to fight for that, and that involves making a difference in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely, I'm in favor of term limits. I would make it three terms for a representative, 2 for a senator, and be done with it. It's just that simple. I'm sick of people voting, and basically the congressmen, all they do is just, they get elected, and the next 2 years all they're doing is running for office again. They're running around their states campaigning again. So I'm very, very much in favor of term limits.
I think this election nationally is about big issues. It's about where we go as a nation. I tell you what I've seen in Washington, D.C. is pretty distressing. That's why when the final vote is done for the week, ladies and gentlemen, I'm coming back home. I will tell you, most of my colleagues never seem to leave Washington. They never seem to listen. My farm, my family, my heart, and my home is right here in Kansas, ladies and gentlemen. That's the way it should be. That's why I continue to fight for a way of life, because without a doubt, this is not about just an ag committee. It's not just about trade. It's not just about health care. It's about our way of life. It's about what's going to happen. Is Washington going to take over the entire economy and run it into the ground? We've had 7 years of no job growth under this president. It's been an utter failure because we're letting the folks in Washington run the show when it should be Kansas that have the freedom and liberty to make those decisions for themselves.
I guess I'm just confused. Tim spent 8-10 years in Topeka, now he spent 6 going on 8 years in Washington. He defines a career politician. We need new blood. Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is insanity. I didn't say that first. It's time for a change. It's time for a big change. We need new people with new ideas, businessmen and women that can solve problems.
Next question from Professor Rackaway. Dr. Marshall will respond.
Gentlemen, New York businessman Donald Trump is, by all accounts, going to serve as the party's nominee for president this year. Trump's bombastic comments have earned him plenty of attention and plenty of derision. GOP activists and leaders like Rick Wilson, and no less a standard bearer than the Weekly Standard, began the hashtag #NeverTrump movement on Twitter that started to take hold among a number of Republican leaders. No less an icon of conservatism than George Will has decided he would rather bolt the party rather than be subjected to supporting Trump. However, over the last month, as Trump's inevitable victory and the primaries became ever more secure, the GOP has begun to tentatively embrace Trump. As the party's nominee in this district, would either of you refused to support Trump as the GOP nominee.
I said it earlier, anyone but Hillary. Anyone but Hillary. And I supported John Kasich from day one. He was not the person that the people have elected. I'm going to support my Republican Party. I can't support Donald Trump. I came out weeks ago saying I can support him. I look forward to working with him and turning this country around.
I don't know if you call it an opportunity, but I've served in Washington, D.C. with Hillary Clinton, ladies and gentlemen. We don't need her as president. I am part of the Never Hillary camp. And as we saw this week, what is so important in this election is the U.S. Supreme Court. They have told us what a marriage is or isn't. Today they told us that we couldn't regulate abortion clinics with common sense health and safety standards. They told us again and again that it's okay to spy on Americans. They told us again and again what we could do with our economic liberty and our freedoms. I think that's what this election is riding on. Who will appoint the next member of the Supreme Court that actually reflects conservative principles? Ladies and gentlemen, that's not Hillary Clinton.
So I would ask each and every one of you this question. If Donald Trump is the next president, which one of us do you think can do a better job working with Donald Trump? A person that's not supported him yet, a person that's still asking his wife if he should support him or not, or myself? I will support the president and work with him to get things done.
Ladies and gentlemen, one thing you know about Tim Huelskamp is I have some conservative principles. I'm going to stand for those principles. Whether you're Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, John Boehner, or take your pick in Washington, D.C., if you don't stand with us on conservative principles, I will work against you. I will work and promote conservative principles. And that's what we're looking for. Folks that actually follow the Constitution and follow the law. And I will tell you, Hillary Clinton, I was actually part of the effort that actually got the Benghazi Committee appointed over the objections of John Boehner for a year and a half. Well, John Boehner, appoint the committee. Let's investigate what's going on here. And I will tell you, as your member of Congress, what's embarrassing to me is I still don't know what they did that night and how they let those 4 Americans to die. And I think Hillary Clinton should answer to that, ladies and gentlemen.
Next question from Fred Goff, Congressman Huelskamp, to respond.
Well, we talked a little bit about this before we began this evening, and I'm not sure any of my colleagues decided to do it, so I will do it here. And Congressman, you talked a little bit, or kind of leaned into it a little bit. Big decision concerning abortion happened today from the United States Supreme Court. I want you to comment on what your feelings are about this ruling and what needs to be done to change the Supreme Court.
Today, by a 5-3 decision, the U.S. Supreme Court made this decree that the state of Texas, plus the state of Kansas, or any other state cannot regulate abortion clinics. We can't even require that you have privileges at the local hospital, or require that you're able to care for emergencies. These are things that are required of every other medical facility in this country. But these 5 judges on the Supreme Court told the state of Texas, told the state of Kansas, actually helped pass legislation like that in Kansas, because it's important that we protect both woman and child. It's critical that we have a sanctity for all human life. There are groups out there that are engaged in this race, ladies and gentlemen, putting money in here, and they're not helping me, that supported this decision today to take away our right to protect women in these abortion clinics. We saw in Philadelphia just a couple of years ago, we had a monster by the name of Colonel Gosnell, who was killing women, killing children. He went to jail for mass murder. Under the Supreme Court's rulings, he would be protected in his clinic.
I think this is, of course, another great example of why this next presidential election is so important. I don't have to tell anybody in this room how important it will for the president to nominate some people with conservative values back to that Supreme Court. So I'm pro-life. I'm 110% pro-life. This ruling disgusts me. I have no idea why we would not hold those types of clinics to the same standard of care that we hold every other surgical hospital or surgery center in this country. It makes no sense at all to me. I'm just disgusted with the whole situation.
My wife said I couldn't talk about her, so assume that I didn't. She is here tonight, but we met doing pro-life work. And I will tell you, that's something at the heart. As a nation, as a society, as a country, if we can't protect our most innocent, if we can't protect our most innocent, who can we protect? And if you look at what I've done for the last number of years, I've defended life, I've defended marriage, I've defended families, which is why Kansans for Life has endorsed me, while National Right to Life has endorsed me, while the Family Research Council has endorsed me, while Dr. James Dobson has endorsed me, because they understand we need a fighter in Washington to take on the court, take on the presidency, and take on agencies that don't respect life, ladies and gentlemen. They do not respect life. That's a core principle that's been lost in Washington for far too long.
I made a lifetime out of being pro-life. I don't think you can be an obstetrician and be anything but pro-life. I've made every effort from day one to help girls in trouble, to make sure they got free health care, to make sure they got to the hospital, to make sure the hospital gave them the appropriate care they made. I've worked helping them get them into Catholic social services and all the other situations that come along with the problem. It grieves my heart that the boy responsible for this oftentimes is not even in the picture, but we just made a lifetime out of trying to help girls in trouble. Our practice, our obstetrical practice in our hospital have always been pro-life and will continue to protect the unborn.
Ladies and gentlemen, this will be the final question for the evening, and the question goes to Ron Sylvester and Dr. Marshall to respond first.
Mr. Huelskamp has talked about the town hall meetings that he's held. I think he said 372. For Mr. Huelskamp, how many town halls were held in communities at night when people who had jobs could attend? And for Dr. Marshall, what would you do to involve the public in the governing process?
So I get the question first. I'm an IT person. I'm trying to adapt to it, but I could, again, running Washington like a business, I would have IT hook up with my office, probably have some receivers here at your Chamber of Commerce. Would be a great place to have it, and I'll be connected to your cities for weekly chats as well. I love coming back to Kansas. I'll have a son will be a senior at K-State next year. I hope this one here will be at K-State the year after that, so we want to come back to K-State games and back home fishing and hunting. That's how I stay connected.
What a lot of folks in Washington understand, listening is not just part of the job, ladies and gentlemen, it is the job. And I have hosted over 370, actually 372 town halls, live and in person. It's more than any other member of Congress in the last 5 years, because I want to listen to you. Now, obviously, not everybody can make those town halls. That's why we've hosted, I think, 30 to 40 telephone town halls. Anybody been on these telephone town halls? We'll have up to 10 to 20,000 people online get asked questions. And we'll receive thousands and thousands of emails, thousands of Facebook posts. We try to respond to every one of those because I want to take what you think and take that back to Washington. Because that's a part of listening. That's part of taking and doing the job. This is a representative Republican. It's not a democracy. It's a representative Republican. And so it's my job to listen and take that back. So we're going to continue to do the town halls. I know folks have been critical about that. But at the end of the day, that's the way to listen. And we also have thousands and thousands of folks come through my office as well and say, listen, what do we need to do to fix our country?
I don't have much to add. I think that my heart, my soul is here in this state. My family is here. My parents are here. I will do everything I can to remain a hometown boy. Remember Senator Dole just talking a couple weeks ago at Fort Hays. He said, always remember where you're from. And I certainly remember where I'm from and so grateful for the integrity that my family has taught me.
Then
Last remark on this question.
Yes, I appreciate that. And again, just hosting town halls is just not the only part of the job, ladies and gentlemen, but it is critical. Again, more town halls, and I know we all look and say, hey, a lot of folks promise things and they never do them. But that was one promise I made 5 years ago. I think we had a debate right here in Hutchinson, said I will visit every single county at least once every year and listen. I would add, probably done that twice almost in every county, with plenty of other visits as well. But at the end of the day, here's what's going on in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of folks up there, a lot of bureaucrats that don't understand or don't care about our way of life. And all I'm asking is, let us live our life the way we'd like, follow the Constitution, and we'll get this country back on the right track.
Our Q&A portion of the program today. So we will conclude with 3 minutes time for closing statements. Dr. Marshall delivered his opening comments first, so Congressman Huelskamp will have the first opportunity for the closing statement. Congressman.
Thank you. As I mentioned at the beginning, ladies and gentlemen, I really believe this. It is an amazing opportunity to serve you in Congress. I never thought that growing up in a small town of 500 people, we often say, Dad always had us locked on the farm. But I have an opportunity to go to Washington and work for farmers and ranchers. Never thought I'd have an opportunity to look the Vietnamese ambassador in the eye and say, hey, I want to sell you stuff. I never thought I had a chance to look the Speaker of the House in the eye and tell him, Mr. Boehner, with all due respect, I don't work for you. I never thought I'd have an opportunity to see the Secretary of an agency in the Barack Obama administration and look him in the eye and said, you know what? You're lying to Congress. And we caught him in a lie. Ladies and gentlemen, you've got to be willing, if you're going to go to Congress, it's not a fun place to be. It's not a place where you go and we're all going to hold hands and get together. No, it's a place where you've got to fight for a way of life. And we've seen that again and again and again. And if you look at my endorsements, one thing we didn't talk about tonight was the Second Amendment. I've been endorsed by the NRA. And you know why? Because I'm going to fight for the Second Amendment. I've been endorsed by Kansas for Life because I'm going to fight for life. I've been endorsed by the Family Research Council because I have a proven conservative record of fighting for families. I've been endorsed by conservative group after conservative groups because I will not vote to raise your taxes. My opponent won't take that pledge. We'll see, he could do that tonight. At the end of the day, we don't need more money. We don't need more power in Washington. We need more power here in Hutchinson. We need more power here at home. We need to take back the power and put the people back in charge. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a real struggle to do that. And you've seen with me, conservative values is not something I just talk about. It's something I vote. And occasionally, as you can guess, sometimes Republicans are part of the problem in Washington, D.C. That's why we have primaries. And I told John Boehner, I told Eric Cantor, I told folks that we're in leadership, so at the end of the day, we don't work for the President of the United States, we work for our constituents. And our constituents are demanding change. We put up with this president for 7.5 years. Congress has the tremendous power of the purse. Problem is, they rarely use it. Ladies and gentlemen, I helped pass a dozen amendments that would rein in this administration, rein in the EPA, rein in these control agencies, take on the IRS. And that's not easy to do. And you don't hold hands with Nancy Pelosi when you do that. You have to stand up and articulate and say, this is what we're for. I think they want to see strong folks on the other side. They'd rather see weak folks that don't stand for what we do. We don't need to worry about electing another conservative because, ladies and gentlemen, you already have one in me in Washington.
Guess it won't come out. As I've been through this campaign process, a very common question I get at this point is to explain to me the difference between yourself and Tim Huelskamp. We're both pretty conservative people, agriculture backgrounds, but I'm just going to lay out for you the differences between them. First and foremost, I can get on the House Ag Committee. He says he can, but that's a gamble that I don't think Kansas is willing to take. The next issue is national security, where we differ from. As an officer in the military, who did training for Desert Storm, I understand national security. I'm able to sit down with a general at Fort Riley or a private at Fort Riley and have an intelligent conversation about what they need. I will not send our boys to a gunfight with a knife. We have to adequately fund national security, and Tim's not been willing to do that. The next difference between us is healthcare. Anyone can stand up here and say repeal it, but I had the clinical experiences running a hospital, running a private practice to actually know what to replace it with. And that's all well and good. That's all very, very well and good. But the biggest difference between Tim and myself is that I'm a peacemaker. We're all given different spiritual talents, and the spiritual talent that God has given me is that of a peacemaker. Since I've been 10 years old, my brothers call me Henry Kissinger. He's standing right here, and he'll attest to that. I'm a peacemaker. I bring people together to solve problems. We can't keep doing the same thing over and over. We need to send new blood that knows how to solve problems rather than just talk about it and point out what's wrong with everybody else. I will be a strong voice for Kansas. I'll give us a voice back on the Ag Committee. I'll fund national security adequately. I'll help repeal and replace health care with something that works for everybody. And lastly, I'm going to get people to work together to solve our problems. We cannot have the left and right continuously fighting with each other and people like our congressman throwing gasoline on that fire constantly. We need people that bring consensus together to solve problems. I'm very humbled to be here tonight. Jason, thank you so much. And to our panelists, thank you for the hard questions. I would be honored to represent you. I ask for your support and your vote. Republican primary, August 2nd. I'm Dr. Roger Marshall. Thanks for coming.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Let's give a quick round of applause to our three panelists who put a lot of time into these questions. Good practices, Mark and Collins, on your way out. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I don't know where you are, but thank you. And everyone, remember to vote on August 2nd. Thank you.
Let's go this way. I think so.